The void was not empty. That was the first and greatest lesson every child born in the Solumbra Pact learned. It was not a black nothingness to be feared, but a rich, deep fabric to be used. It held resources, shelter, and safety for those who knew how to live within it without trying to conquer it. The Pact was not a glittering empire of planets under suns. It was a hidden network of stations buried in asteroids, shipyards cloaked in the dust of nebulas, and cities that thrived in the perpetual twilight of rogue planets, far from any star's warmth. They were the architects of the silent places. On the Kuiper-class habitat, known as Chungmuro, the only light was the soft blue glow of workstations and the steady green pulse of life support monitors. The light from the distant stars did not reach here, in the gravitational shadow of a gas giant that itself orbited a cold, failed star. Senior Engineer Jin watched the data scroll across his screen. He was a man of steady hands and a calm mind, his face lined more from concentration than age. Before him, a schematic of the dark energy tap floated. It was a miracle of human ingenuity, a spider web of filaments and field projectors that siphoned infinitesimal amounts of energy from the empty space itself, powering the entire habitat. Output is steady at 98.7%, he said, his voice quiet in the hum of the control room. The new dampeners are working. No more fluctuations from the debris field. His assistant, a young man named Tay, nodded, making a note on his own tablet. There was no celebration. Success was the expected state. Across the habitat, in the main observation blister, Jin's daughter Hana sat with her learning cohort. Their teacher, an older woman named Jia, pointed not at bright stars, but at a vast, dark smudge against the deeper black. There, Jia said, the Draco dust cloud. To any outside observer, it is a void, a blank spot in their maps. To us, it is home to 3 mining outposts, a refining station, and the Waypoint Cradle, where new long-range scouts are born. Our strength is not in being seen, but in being. We are the things that live in the corners of the universe's eyes. Hana watched the darkness, not with fear, but with understanding. She was learning hydroponics and structural mechanics, how to grow food and how to keep the walls from crumbling under the endless, pressing dark. Her world was one of recycled water, carefully balanced atmospheres, and the soft vibration of the habitat's engines making tiny corrections to its orbit. It was a world of quiet purpose. Far from the Chungmuro, a small scout ship, the Sparrow, moved through a different kind of dark. This was the debris field of a long-dead solar system, a treasure trove of metals and rare minerals. At its controls was Su Min, Jin's wife. Her hands moved over the panels with a pilot's gentle certainty. The Sparrow had no blazing engines. It used tiny, precise gravity nudges and reaction thrusters so small their plumes were invisible. Its hull was coated in a material that drank sensor pulses and emitted less heat than a human body. To look at it was to see a slightly colder patch of nothing. Marker 47 is pure iron nickel, she reported back to the Chungmuro, her voice a whisper on the tight beam laser comm. Estimated yield, 12 million metric tons. Sending coordinates to the retrieval tugs. She didn't smile, but a feeling of deep satisfaction settled in her chest. This was her part. She found the pieces, and others would build with them. She looked at the family hologram on her console, Jin, Hana, and herself, taken during the last cycle's reunion festival on the central hub. They were a family built in the dark, bound by a shared, unspoken understanding of their place in the cosmos. Back on the Chungmuro, the shift changed. Jin handed over his station to the next engineer. He walked through the quiet, curved corridors of the habitat. The walls were not cold metal. They were a warm, textured composite, grown from asteroid minerals and fungal mycelium. Light came from bioluminescent panels that glowed with a soft, living light. He passed community gardens where fish swam in clear tanks above rows of leafy greens, their waste feeding the plants. People nodded to him, speaking in low tones. There was no rush, no raised voices. Life here required a calm, persistent energy. He reached their dwelling unit. Hana was already there, working on a model of a magnetic containment shield for her engineering basics class. "Appa," she said, not looking up from her soldering iron. "The secondary coil keeps overheating in the simulation. I think the coolant channel is too narrow." Jin leaned over, studying her design. "You are trying to make it too efficient. Sometimes you must allow for waste heat to disperse. Widen the channel by 0.5 millimeters. It will reduce peak output by 2%, but it will never fail." Hana nodded, absorbing the lesson. Perfection was not the goal. Reliability was. Later, as the artificial night cycle dimmed the lights, Jin sat with Hana. On the viewer, Elder Yoonji was giving her weekly address. Her face was serene, her hair silver and pulled back. She spoke not from a grand palace, but from a simple room that could have been anywhere in the pact. The latest scans from the Orion Fringe show continued activity from the luminous dynasties. Yoonji said, her voice calm and clear. They war over star systems, burning worlds to claim the light. Let them. Our ancestors chose a different path. They saw that the bright places attract fire. So, they learned to build with shadow and silence. We do not hide. We simply exist where others do not think to look. Remember this. Our empire is not a place on a map. It is the sum of our peace, our work, and our choice to live free from the endless, wasteful glare of war. Tend to your gardens, your engines, and your families. That is how we endure. The screen went dark. Hannah looked at her father. Do you think they will ever find us? The luminous ones? Jin put a hand on her shoulder. Space is very big, little one, and we are very, very quiet. They look for suns and planets. We live in the places between. Now sleep. Your mother returns from the debris field in 2 cycles. In her bunk, Hannah thought about the dark. She thought of her mother flying through it, a silent guide. She thought of her father's hands on the controls that kept the lights on and the air fresh. She thought of Elder Yoonji's words. The dark was not her enemy. It was her home. And as she drifted to sleep to the gentle, constant hum of the Chongnuro, she felt not fear, but a profound sense of safety. They were the keepers of the quiet. And in that quiet, they had built everything that mattered. The Kalanix Federation believed the universe was a book written in light, and they were its most brilliant readers. Their ships were works of art, sleek and polished, their engines burning with a clean blue-white fury that announced their presence across solar systems. They communicated in wide, shouting bursts of subspace radio, painting their intentions across the stars for all to see and admire. They spread order, civilization, and illumination. Where there was darkness, they brought light. It was their duty, and their right. The command deck of the Kalanix battle globe Luminance of Certainty was a cavern of light and sound. Commander Voxus stood at the central platform, his 4 arms clasped behind his back. Data streams flowed around him in glowing ribbons. His officers, their chitinous skins gleaming under the artificial sun lamps, worked with efficient pride. They were mapping a sector on the edge of known space, a region their long-range scans had marked as curiously dim. Commander, his sensor officer, a female named Lyra, chimed. Her voice was like ringing crystal. The null zone ahead. Scans remain muted, high mineral signatures, but energy readings are paradoxical, almost ambient. It defies categorization. Voxus examined the holographic display. It showed a plot of space near a slow-spinning neutron star. The data was fuzzy, inconsistent. Paradox is merely unapplied logic. The light of understanding must be brought to bear. Take us to the coordinates of the strongest mineral signal. Standard scan protocol. If there are squatters or prospectors, they will be moved. This space is under Kalinek's purview now. The luminance of certainty moved forward. Its powerful gravity drives pushing it into the silent region. On its approach, it lit up the void with active LiDAR and probing energy beams, searching for anything to define, to categorize, to claim. On the Solumbra mining outpost Silanine, the alarm was a soft, vibrating pulse in the wrist links of the crew, not a blaring siren. Foreman Min Su was in the middle of a pressure seal repair on the main digger when he felt it. He tapped the link. A simple text scrolled across the tiny screen. Unidentified radiant contact. Approach vector 37 by 14. Non-standard emission profile. Threat potential. Elevated. Min Su sighed. Not again. Sometimes scavengers or lost traders stumbled near their space. The protocol was always the same. Go dark, go quiet, and let them pass. He spoke into his suit gum. All teams, curtain protocol. Secure external operations. Full radio silence. Let the visitors have their look and leave. Across the small rock, lights winked out. Heat signatures were drawn in. The few antennae retracted. Within minutes, Silanine became, to any but the most dedicated seeker, just another cold, uninteresting chunk of nickel iron. On the bridge of the luminance, Lyra frowned. The mineral signature is clear, Commander. But the contact, it has faded. Thermal is dropping rapidly. It is as if the rock itself is cooling on command. Impossible, Voxus stated. It is a trick. Perhaps primitive stealth. Active targeting scan. Illuminated. A powerful beam of coherent energy lanced from the battle globe, striking the surface of Silanine. On the rock, shield generators, designed to handle micrometeor impacts and cosmic radiation, flared online automatically. To the Kalinek sensors, the dark rock suddenly glowed with a brief, shimmering umbrella of energy. A shield, Lyra announced, a note of triumph in her voice. Primitive, but confirmed. It is an occupied installation. Voxus felt a surge of irritation. These creatures were hiding from the light. They were deliberately obscuring themselves in his sector. This was not order. It was chaos. Hail them. Standard Kalinek's first contact and clearance directive. A wideband transmission shot toward the rock. Unidentified installation. This is Commander Voxus of the Kalinek's Federation vessel Luminance of Certainty. You are operating in a zone of Kalinek's interest. Deactivate your stealth systems and announce your species and purpose. Comply for peaceful integration. Inside Silanine, Min Su read the translation on his screen. His heart sank. This was not a lost trader. The language, the tone, the sheer power of the ship now visible on their passive scanners. It was an empire. The worst kind. He had to follow the next part of the protocol. The warning. He sent a tight beam, low-power laser pulse back along the path of their hail. The message was text only, meant to be minimal. Kalinek's vessel. You have entered secured Solumbra Pact space. Your scanning beam is interpreted as hostile. Cease emissions and depart. This space is not for you. Voxus received the message. He read it. His irritation turned to cold anger. Secured space? They dare to claim a null zone? And they issue a warning? To us? He saw the message as the height of arrogance from a species hiding in a hole. They are vermin. Clear the infestation. A single low-yield lance to their power center. Remove the shield, and then we will see who they are. A weapon port on the battle globe glowed. A bolt of superheated plasma, bright enough to blind, shot across the void. It struck the shields of Selenine. The shields held, but alarms screamed inside the rock. The heat transfer was immense. A section of the outer mining bay melted. Minsu was thrown against a wall. The air filled with the smell of ozone and scorched metal. He coughed, grabbing his console. This was an attack. A real one. He sent the final pulse, the one he never thought he'd have to use. It was not a call for help to a military, for the Pact had no standing military. It was a distress call to the nearest protectorate vessel, a guardian of their quiet space. That vessel was the VN-77 Magungwa, on a routine patrol of the debris lanes. Its captain, Day, was a serious man who had known Jin at the academy. His ship was a sliver of darkness, its lines angular and purposeful. When the distress pulse arrived, tagged with Selenine's codes and the severity marker for active kinetic engagement, his calm eyes hardened. Plot and intercept course. Silent running. Bring the gravity lens to standby. Do not power weapons until we see it. His crew, small and efficient, moved without a word. The Magungwa turned, its engines pulsing so softly they would not stir dust. They arrived to see the Kalinix battle globe, a jewel of arrogant light, firing a second, more powerful lance at the darkened rock. The sight of the brilliant, destructive beam cutting through the dark where his people lived and worked sent a cold fury through Day. But fury was a waste of energy. He positioned his ship silently, perfectly, between the Luminance and Selenine. On the Luminance, Lyra jerked back. "Commander, a new contact. It just appeared. Between us and the rock. No engine signature. No thermal bloom. Its profile is all wrong." Voxes zoomed the display. He saw it then, an angular shadow that seemed to drink the light from his own ship's glare. It was ugly. It was silent. It was a blot on the perfection of the scene. He opened a hail, this time directed at the shadow. "Interloping vessel. You obstruct Kalinek's justice. Identify yourself immediately, or be unmade alongside the vermin you protect." On the Magungwa, Day listened to the translation. He saw the damage reports from Selenine scrolling on another screen. No deaths yet, but injuries. His people, in their own space. He keyed their response. He used the old radio band, the simple one. His voice was flat, calm, and carried no visual. "Kalinek's Commander Voxus, this is Captain Day of the Solumbra Protectorate. You have fired upon a civilian installation. You are in violation of our sovereignty. Power down your weapons and submit to escort from this space. This is your only warning." Voxus actually laughed, a sharp clicking sound. "Submit? You, a shadow, give a warning to the light? You have no sovereignty here. Only what you can hold. And you hold nothing." He made a decision. A demonstration was required. Target the shadow ship. Disabling shot. Primary lance. The weapon fired. The brilliant beam of energy, which could cripple a Kalinix frigate, struck the dark hull of the Magungwa. On the Kalinix sensors, they expected a flash, an explosion, a cloud of debris. What they saw was different. The ship's strange, matte black skin seemed to ripple where the beam hit. The energy flared for a microsecond, and then faded. It was absorbed, dissipated, radiated away as harmless infrared in directions away from the Kalinix ship. The Magungwa shuddered slightly from the kinetic push, but its system's readouts on Day's screen stayed a steady, calm green. A stunned silence fell on the luminance bridge. Lyra stared at her instruments. The energy. It's gone. The ship shows no damage. No significant heat increase. Commander, their dissipation technology is... It is not possible. Voxus felt the first cold trickle of something unfamiliar in his gut. It was not fear, not yet. It was the unsettling feeling of the equation not balancing. The light had struck, and the darkness had simply swallowed it. His voice was tight. All weapons. Full barrage. Destroy it. But in the moment of his shock, Day had given his own order. Kinetic solution. Target their primary engine array. Fire. From ports along the Magungwa's spine, magnetic rails launched silent, heavy slugs of tungsten. There was no bright trail, only the sudden, catastrophic appearance of fist-sized holes, punching through the gleaming hull of the luminance of certainty. Alarms, real and loud, now screamed on the Kalanex bridge. Then, Day activated the ship's main system. Gravity lens? Focus on their core. The Magungwa did not create gravity. It bent it, subtly, precisely. Deep inside the battle globe, the contained star of its power core suddenly found space itself twisting around it. The delicate balance failed. The containment F. The silence after the destruction of the luminance of certainty did not last. The Kalanex Federation was a vast, proud organism. The sudden, complete loss of a battle globe was not just a defeat. It was an impossible insult. The final, screaming transmission from Commander Voxus, a distorted image of the angular, dark Magungwa, and the words, "The darkness is alive," flashed across their networks. It was treated not as a warning, but as a declaration of war from a hidden enemy. The high luminary Karzan addressed the ruling conclave. His voice was not angry, but coldly analytical. A parasite has been discovered in the dark corners of our house. It does not bask in the light of civilization. It skulks, it ambushes. It must be cleansed with purifying fire, so all may see that the Kalanex light cannot be defied. The Kalanex war machine, built for glorious fleet battles and planetary bombardments, turned its gaze toward the dark places. They called it the Luminous Purge. Fleets of brilliant ships, their hulls polished to a mirror sheen, descended upon the regions flagged with strange sensor ghosts. They brought light with them, powerful scanning beams that swept asteroids, blinding plasma flares that lit up nebulas from within, and pulsar cannons that fired rhythmic, pounding barrages into any shadow that seemed too deep. On the habitat Chongmuro, life changed. The quiet rhythm was now underscored by a new, steady pulse, military alerts. Jin spent less time on the dark energy taps and more time in the defense coordination room. His engineering mind was now applied to shield harmonics and sensor baffling. Hana's lessons now included emergency decompression drills and basic damage control. The fear was a quiet, cold thing, held at bay by constant work. Elder Yunji's broadcasts were more frequent, her serene face an anchor for billions. "They bring their light," she said, her hands folded calmly. "They think it will reveal us. But we were not built in the light. We were built from the darkness. Their light is a torch in a vast, cold ocean. It shows only how little they can see. Hold to your posts. Be calm. Be patient. Be the void." The first major Kalanex thrust was into the Draco dust cloud. A full battle group, the Radiant Spear, entered the cloud, their ships shining like angry suns in the dust. They expected to find hidden bases, shipyards, cities. They found only echoes and silence. Their active scans bounced off the strange, absorbent materials of the pack's outer habitats, returning useless noise. Their flares illuminated vast, empty stretches of dust and rock. Then their logistics train began to suffer. A large, unarmed Kalanex tender, carrying fuel and ammunition, was moving between two cruisers when it simply split in half. There was no explosion, no beam of light. Scans showed a cloud of ultra-dense nanomachines, like dark dust, had drifted into its path. The machines, programmed to disassemble specific metallic compounds, had reduced critical structural members to powder in seconds. The tender silently came apart, its supplies spilling into the void. By the time the escort ships turned their lights on the debris, the nanocloud had already dispersed, becoming one with the natural dust. Elsewhere, Kalinek's patrols went silent. A squadron of fast-attack skimmers entered a dense asteroid field to investigate a faint energy reading. They never came out. Captain Day, in the Magungwa, monitored them from within a hollowed-out asteroid. His ship was one of several. They did not engage directly. They watched. They waited. When the skimmers were deep in the maze, the Protectorate ships activated localized gravity pulses. They did not crush the ships. They nudged them. A gentle push sent a skimmer veering into the path of a tumbling rock. Another pulse caused a pilot to overcorrect, scraping his ship along a cliff face. The Kalinek's comms filled with confused shouts and collision alarms. One by one, their lights went out, snuffed by the cold, uncaring physics of the asteroid field. The Ma Xinhua and its sisters departed before the main Kalinek's force could arrive, leaving only wreckage and unanswered questions. The Kalinek's grew frustrated. This was not war as they understood it. There were no noble lines of battle, no heroic charges. Their enemy was a ghost, a poison, a trick of the shadows. They began to call the humans void specters and dark dwellers. Their once unshakable morale began to crack, replaced by a creeping paranoia. Every dark patch on their scanners was a potential threat. Every quiet moment was a prelude to an unseen attack. Su Min's role changed utterly. Her scout ship, the Sparrow, was no longer a surveyor. It was now a hunter, its cargo holds stripped out and replaced with racks of silent, deadly missiles. She worked in a wing with other scouts, pilots she had known for years. Their missions were not to destroy fleets, but to wound the enemy's confidence. She found herself drifting near a Kalinek's communications buoy, a bright, flashing relay station. Her ship, coated in its sensor-absorbent skin, was just another piece of cosmic background. She released a single small drone. It attached to the buoy like a silent barnacle. Hours later, when the Kalinek's fleet commander sent an order to regroup, the drone activated. It didn't jam the signal. It altered it. The order to regroup at Vector 7 became disperse to Vector 7. For 5 critical hours, a quarter of the Kalinek's force flew in the wrong direction. Scattered and vulnerable Chin heard about these tactics. He understood the strategy, but a part of him, the part that built things, mourned. This was not what their technology was for. It was for life, for quiet growth. Now, it was being used to spread confusion and fear. He worked harder, ensuring the Chongmuro's shields were perfect, its heat sinks flawless. He thought of Su Min out there in the deep dark, not just napping it, but now using it as a weapon. He thought of Hana, learning to patch whole breaches instead of designing gardens. The Kalinek's, in their anger, finally made a mistake. They captured a small, damaged packed freighter, the Wayfarer, whose stealth systems had failed during a near-miss with a Kalinek's patrol. They boarded it, expecting to find warriors. They found 3 terrified crew members, a pilot, an engineer, and a botanist. Under the harsh lights of a Kalinek's interrogation chamber, they were questioned about the location of the pack's central worlds, their leadership, their home. The botanist, a young woman named Mi Sha, just shook her head. "We have no central world," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "Home is where the community is. It moves. It is quiet." The Kalinek's interrogator did not believe her. He saw it as defiance. But the engineer, an older man named Biam, when pressed about their technology, said something that was later included in the Kalinek's intelligence report. "You look for the source of the light. We never had a source. We learned to live without needing one." The report reached High Luminary Karzan. He read it again and again. The frustration of the purge was now a cold knot in his stomach. They were not fighting an empire. They were fighting an idea, a philosophy of silence and shadow. To defeat an idea, you had to shatter its symbol. You had to find its heart, even if it claimed to have none. He called his best strategists. Forget the shadows. Follow the gravity. Their ships move. Their stations need power. Trace the most subtle gravitational anomalies. Find the largest concentration. Find where their silence is loudest. Then we will bring not a torch, but a sun. We will burn the darkness out. The Kepler anchor was the closest thing the Solumbra Pact had to a capital, but it was not a city of gleaming towers. It was a colossal, intricate machine, a heart that beat silently in the chest of the void. Built into and around a dormant brown dwarf, a failed star that emitted only a faint, deep infrared glow, it was a masterpiece of hidden engineering. Its docks could berth ships like the Hua. Its forges could process asteroids into habitat rings. Its vast life support systems recycled the air and water for millions. And it was all powered by banks of dark energy taps, larger than those on any habitat, humming in unison deep within the station's core. It was the great workshop of the darkness, and its location was the Pact's most guarded secret. High Luminary Carson's new strategy worked. By ignoring the confusing sensor ghosts and focusing only on the faintest, most persistent ripples in gravity, the kind made by something very large. Holding very still, his fleet's analysts found a pattern that pointed to the brown dwarf system known as KC-992, a useless, lightless blot on any standard map. The Kalanex Armada assembled. It was not a battle group, but their mightiest force. 12 dreadnoughts, each a floating city of weapons, surrounded by 30 cruisers and a cloud of attack craft. They named the operation Solar Dawn, believing they would bring the light of a new day to a place that had never known one. The first warning for the Kepler anchor was not a sensor ping, but a shift in the gravitational tides. The sensitive equipment deep in the station's monitoring rooms detected the mass of the approaching Armada long before any ship could be seen. The quiet alarm was raised. Across the anchor, lights did not flare red. They dimmed to a lower emergency standby blue. The population moved not with panic, but with a grim, practiced purpose. Families gathered in reinforced inner hubs. Engineers reported to damage control stations. Protectorate pilots sprinted to their silent fighters. Elder Yunji stood in the central nexus, a room at the very center of the station. Screens showed the approaching blips of light, a constellation of hostility moving toward their one quiet star. Her face, reflected in the cool light, was pale but set. She opened a channel to the entire pact. "They have found a place," she said, her voice still calm, but with a new iron weight beneath it. "They have found the Kepler anchor. But remember, they have not found us. We are not this station. We are the choice to live free. That choice cannot be destroyed by any weapon. But today, we must protect our home. Today, we stand in the darkness, and we say, no further." Captain Day brought the Magangwa and every other protectorate vessel back to the anchor. They formed a defensive screen, a fleet of shadows against the coming glare. But the numbers were impossible. They were a dozen silent knives against a wall of shining hammers. The Kalanex Armada arrived and did not hail. They opened fire. The darkness of the KC-992 system was torn apart by light. Lances of plasma, pulses of disruptive energy, and torrents of kinetic shells streamed toward the anchor. The station's shields, designed to withstand the brown dwarf's occasional magnetic fury, flared into visibility, a vast shimmering dome of energy that rang like a colossal bell with each impact. On the command decks of the Kalanex dreadnoughts, there was satisfaction. The enemy was fixed. The enemy could be broken. Day's ships attacked. They darted forward, firing their kinetic slugs and launching missiles. They destroyed several cruisers, crippled a dreadnought's weapon array. But for every Galactic ship damaged, 2 more took its place. The Protectorate ships were built for stealth and strikes, not for a siege. One by one, the shadows began to fade. A corvette, the Willow, was caught in a crossfire and vanished in a silent flash. Another, the Reed, took a hit to its engines and began to drift, helpless dot inside the anchor. The world shook. Jin was in a lower engineering bay, trying to stabilize a power coupling that had been overloaded by the shield strain. The whole station groaned around him, a sound of metal under terrible stress. A conduit burst above him, spraying vapor. He sealed his helmet instinctively. On a secondary screen, he saw the shield integrity percentage dropping. 80. 70. 65. They were losing. The math was simple and brutal. He thought of Hana, safe in a bunker with her learning cohort. He thought of Su Min, who he knew was out there in her scout, part of the harassing attacks on the Armada's edges. He thought of the gardens on the Chungmuro, now likely abandoned. This was not how it was supposed to be. They were builders, not warriors. The Galactics were turning their home, their greatest creation, into a tomb. An idea, desperate and wild, formed in his mind. It was not about weapons. It was about what they were. He opened a direct line to Elder Yunji in the Nexus. Elder, the shields will fail. We cannot outfight them. Yunji's voice was tired. I know, Engineer Jin. We have prepared for this. The evacuation ships are ready in the deep docks. No, Jin said, his mind racing over schematics of the dark energy taps. Not evacuation. Not yet. They fight with light. It is all they know. Our strength is not in matching their light. Our strength is in being the darkness itself. The taps, we can run them in reverse. There was a long silence, broken by another distant thud that vibrated through the station's bones. Explain, Yunji said. The taps pull tiny energy from the void to give us power, Jin said, his words coming faster. But the principle can be inverted. We can create a field of active negation, a dampening wave. It won't destroy matter, but it will cancel the specific energy states. Their technology relies on plasma containment, forced particle excitation, even their basic electronics. We can't make a bigger light, but we can ask the darkness to swallow theirs. On the screen, the shield integrity hit 50%. Alarms began to sound a deeper, more urgent tone. EUNG closed her eyes for a second. She saw the faces of her people. She saw the blinding arrogance of the Galactic's light. She saw the choice, to run and be hunted forever, or to make a stand that was true to what they were. What is the risk? She asked. The power draw could burn out the tap array permanently, Jin said. And the field would be total. It would cover the anchor too. For a time, we would be as blind and powerless as they are. We would be adrift in the dark with them. Yunji nodded slowly. A strange peace settled over her. It was a gamble of ultimate trust in their own ability to endure the dark better than their enemy. Do it, she said. Authorize Eventide Protocol. Jin's hands flew across his console. He linked with the other engineers across the station. He rerouted power from the failing shields, from non-critical life support, from every system except the bare minimum to keep their hearts beating and their air cold. The massive dark energy taps deep in the station's core began to spin down, then whine as they were forced into an unnatural reversing cycle. On the Magongwa, Day saw the anchor's shields flicker at 45%. He prepared the order for a final desperate charge to buy time for the evacuation ships. Then he saw it. The entire station seemed to deepen. The few running lights on its hull winked out. The faint thermal bloom it emitted vanished. It became a hole in space, blacker than the black around it. "What are they doing?" His tactical officer whispered. They didn't know. But he felt a chill that was not from fear. It was the chill of the deep void, the true void, being invited in. "All ships," he said, his voice tight. "Pull back. Maximum distance from the anchor. Now." The Galactic's armada saw the shields weakening. High Luminary Carson, aboard the dreadnought Eternal Radiance, gave the order. "All vessels, focus fire on the central hub. Break their will. Bring the light." As one, the entire armada charged its weapons for a final, annihilating salvo. At that exact moment, the Kepler anchor unleashed the eventide. There was no flash, no explosion. A wave of absolute negation pulsed outwards, silent and invisible. It moved at the speed of light. Where it passed, energy died. On the bridge of the Eternal Radiance, every screen went black. The constant, comforting hum of the engine ceased so completely, the silence was a physical shock. The brilliant illumination from the ceiling panels faded to nothing, plunging the vast room into a blackness, so total Carson could not see his own hand before his face. He stumbled, grabbing his chair. Shouts of confusion and sudden terror erupted around him. He tried to speak, to give orders, but his gums were dead. His ship was a cold, dark tomb, adrift in a sea it had tried to conquer. Across the entire battlefield, every Galactic ship went dark. Their proud, shining fleet became a graveyard of silent, powerless hulks. Their light, their noise, their certainty all gone, swallowed by a darkness that had finally decided to answer back. The silence was absolute. Inside the Kepler anchor, the only sounds were the panicked breaths of its inhabitants and the groaning of strained metal cooling in the void. The constant, vital hum of machinery was gone. The emergency lights were dead. The air grew still and began to cool. Jin sat in the pitch black of the engineering bay, the glow from his suit's helmet lamp a tiny, fragile bubble in the immense dark. His heart pounded against his ribs. He had thrown the switch, but he had no idea what was happening outside. Had it worked? Or had they simply turned themselves off for the Galactics to finish? In the central nexus, Elder Yunji felt the cold seep through her simple robes. A young aide fumbled to put a thermal blanket around her shoulders. She waved it away gently. "See to the children in the bunkers first," she said, her voice a quiet command in the dark. She did not need light to know her duty. She sat in her chair, waiting. This was the ultimate test of their philosophy. Could they endure their own medicine? Outside, the visual was one of the most terrifying things the Galactics had ever witnessed, for those who could still see. The Protectorate ships, designed for the dark, were merely invisible. But the Galactic's armada, a moment ago a blazing constellation of power and glory, was now a fleet of dead, dark sculptures. Their engine flares had vanished. Their viewports were black. Not a single light or energy signature bled from them. They were frozen in the act of their final attack, rendered into inert scrap by a force they could not comprehend. On the bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Radiance, High Luminary Carson's mind raced in the absolute blackness. He heard the muffled cries, the clangs of crew stumbling in the dark. He felt the first subtle shudder as his ship, its stabilizing thrusters dead, began a slow, uncontrolled drift. The cold was already biting through his ceremonial armor. This was not a weapon. This was an erasure. The Dark Dwellers hadn't fought their light. They had simply turned it off. A primal, ancient fear, one his species had buried under eons of luminous civilization, clawed its way up his throat. This was the fear of the eternal night, of the quiet that never ended. Then, a sound, A simple analog click and a hiss of static. A basic radio receiver, battery-powered and isolated from the ship's fried networks, sputtered to life on a console nearby. A voice came through, speaking in clear, unadorned Kalanix trade language. It was Yun-Ji, High Luminary Karzan of the Kalanix Federation. This is Elder Yun-Ji of the Solumbra Pact. You brought your light to our home. We have returned the favor. We have not destroyed you. We have simply asked the darkness to hold you. Carson stumbled toward the sound, his hands scraping on the cold console. He found the microphone for the simple unit. What sorcery is this? He rasped, his voice raw. It is not sorcery, came the reply, calm and relentless. It is a choice. You chose to see the universe as something to illuminate and dominate. We chose to see it as a place to live within. Your ships are now as dark and powerless as the space you despised. In approximately one standard cycle, your life support will fail. The cold will take you. You will die in the silence you sought to shatter. A wave of icy despair washed over Karzan. He saw it all. The Grand Fleet, the pride of the Federation, dying not in a glorious flash, but in a slow, silent freeze. It was a humiliation worse than destruction. He had no words. Another voice cut in on the same frequency. Captain Day, but we are not like you. The words hung in the dark air of the bridge. Day continued. We do not leave beings to die in the void. Your aggression is answered, but our nature is not murder. Tugs are approaching your fleet. They are unharmed. They will use physical grapples and tow cables. They will guide your ships one by one to the third planet in this system. It is barren, but it has a thin, breathable atmosphere and liquid water. You will be landed there. You will be left with basic survival gear shelters, water reclaimers, seed kits for the native algae. A low-power radio beacon will be activated on the planet's surface. It will broadcast a simple location ping. Your people will find you in time. The message ended. Karzan sank to his knees in the darkness, not in prayer, but in utter, overwhelming shock. Mercy. They were showing mercy. It was a concept utterly alien to the current Kalanix warmind. Mercy was weakness. Yet this mercy, delivered from a position of total control, felt more absolute and terrifying than any execution. They were being spared not out of compassion, but out of a profound, dispassionate principle. A principle that said, we will not become you. Over the next hours, the Kalanix crewmen, shivering in the dark, felt the jarring thuds of magnetic grapples locking onto their hulls. Through frozen viewports, they saw the shapes of bulky, utilitarian Solumbra tugs, lit only by faint navigation lights, hauling their mighty dreadnoughts like dead whales. There was no resistance. There was no possibility of it. On the planet's surface, a rocky, windswept plain under a dim, red sun, the Kalanix were unloaded. They huddled in the crude, functional shelters, watching as the last Solumbra tug released its grapples and ascended silently into the black sky. Above them, they could see the faint, moving shadows of their own immense warships, parked in low orbit like discarded toys. The beacon on a nearby hill began its slow, repetitive pulse. A heartbeat in the wilderness, not back on the Kepler anchor. Power was slowly, carefully restored. The dark energy taps were ruined, scorched and fused from the eventide pulse. But secondary systems, shielded and isolated, came online. Light and warmth returned. There was no cheering. Only a deep, weary relief and a somber understanding. Jin found Hannah in their quarters. She hugged him tightly, saying nothing. Su Min returned from the void, her scout ship docking with a quiet sigh of magnets. Their family was together, in a home that had nearly been broken. Elder Yunji gave a final broadcast. Her face was tired, but her eyes were clear. "The war is over," she said. "Not because we destroyed an enemy, but because we showed them what we are. We are not killers of light. We are the guardians of the quiet. The Kalaniks will remember the cold of the void we showed them. They will remember the hand that pulled them from it. They will think twice before ever bringing their fire into our darkness again. Go back to your work. Tend to your gardens, your engines, your families. The silence is ours once more. Let us build in it again and remember the price of peace." In the following cycles, the Solumbra Pact retreated even deeper into the quiet. They moved the Kepler anchor, using slow, patient tugs to a new shadow. They repaired. They planted. They built Dot, and on the barren world, under the red sun, High Luminary Karzan stood at night and looked up. He could see the glittering arm of their galaxy, a smear of stolen light. He could also see the deep, black spaces between the stars. He now knew what lived there. Not monsters. Not specters. Something far more unsettling. A people who had built an empire not on conquest, but on the simple, unshakable will to be left alone. An empire so strong in its silence that it could afford to be merciful. And as the cold wind blew, he understood, for the first time, the true, terrifying nature of the dark. It was not empty. It was patient. And it was watching.